Airey Neave, one of Margaret Thatcher's closest confidants and friends, was assassinated in a car bomb attack by the Irish National Liberation Army, or INLA, on the 30th of March 1979, in a murder which shocked the British establishment. Years later, allegations of collusion by military and secret services intelligence would swirl around Neave's assassination. The intelligence war that occurred during Northern Ireland's Troubles, often referred to as the Dirty War, has long been associated with so-called collusion. The allegation was that British agents inside paramilitary organisations gave British intelligence power over who lived and who died, which operations proceeded, and which were foiled by the regular security forces. Initial collusion allegations centred around a former British soldier, Brian Nelson, who had become a leading member of the UDA, the Ulster Defence Association. Nelson was heavily involved in the UDA's targeting of both Republicans and ordinary Catholic civilians. As time went on, shocking revelations came to light of a number of British agents holding high positions within Republican paramilitaries, who were supposed to be fighting the British, most famously Freddie Scappaticci, codename Steak Knife, who died just over a year ago. Collusion branched out everywhere, including allegations that Military Intelligence's Force Research Unit, known by its acronym FRU, had allowed deadly attacks on their own British soldiers to protect agents from exposure. It was in this climate that allegations were made about Airey Neave's murder. Neave had had a colourful career in the British establishment and was born into privilege. His great-great-grandfather had been the second Baronet of Neave. Young Airey went to Eton and Oxford. Unlike some of the upper classes, he was strongly opposed to Hitler, having visited Nazi Germany, and then penned an essay warning of the dangers they posed. Serving with the Royal Artillery upon the outbreak of war, he was wounded and captured at Calais. After an escape attempt, he spent time in the famous Colditz prison. After failing in one attempt, he successfully escaped Colditz and made it back to England in 1942, where he received the Military Cross and a promotion to captain. For the remainder of the war, he worked principally in intelligence, managing escape lines from occupied Europe. At war's end, and as a qualified lawyer fluent in German, he was an investigator at the Nuremberg trials. After gaining election to the House of Commons in 1953, his political career was a stop-start affair, not least because of a heart attack. A rise to prominence came when he was campaign manager for Margaret Thatcher's successful ouster of Ted Heath as Conservative Party leader in 1975. He became Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and would have been Thatcher's Secretary of State for Northern Ireland had he not been murdered. This was the foundation for the collusion theory. Neave was an integrationist on the question of Northern Ireland, meaning that he favoured abandoning the idea of a devolved power-sharing accommodation between the two communities in the conflict. He also favoured stronger action by the SAS and security services to target mainly Republican paramilitaries. Perhaps there would even have been a return to internment without trial. This horrified the security services and elements of the British establishment, who had spent much time and effort trying to covertly promote elements within the IRA and republicanism, which saw politics rather than violence as the way forward. For this stance, Neave was a prime target not only of Republicans, but potentially of the security services. The theory is fleshed out in Paul Routledge's biography of Neave entitled Public Servant, Secret Agent. Routledge asserts that Neave, as a former spook himself, intended to take a hands-on approach to the agencies. Corruption and ineffectiveness were rife in MI5 and MI6, and Neave reportedly said he planned to, quote, clean the Augean stable. The CIA, and by expansion the US, was also said to be unhappy with the prospect of Neave. as their policy was to encourage a united Ireland within the European Union and NATO. The last thing they wanted was an intensification of conflict in Northern Ireland, giving them a motive to either assist or turn a blind eye to the assassination. Routledge spoke to Gerald James, the former director of the arms company Astra, who claimed that the mercury tilt switch used in the murder was only available to the CIA at the time. Intelligence agent and whistleblower Colin Wallace, who has made many claims about what was going on in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, is also quoted by Routledge. Wallace claimed that at the time, the INLA was riddled with British agents. Its membership was known and monitored extensively. The inference is clear that if the INLA had planned such an audacious operation, British intelligence would have known about it and been able to put a stop to it, if they wanted to. Several leading members of the INLA and its political wing, the Irish Republican Socialist Party, or IRSP, were later hit for a variety of stated reasons, which could be interpreted as revenge for the murder of Neave, or house cleaning to protect Secret Service infiltration of the organisation. Routledge also spoke with unnamed sources who were active within the INLA at the time, who appeared to confirm the role of British intelligence and the FRU in the murky world of Irish paramilitary groups on both sides. Supporters of calls for a truth commission in Northern Ireland originally tended to come from the Republican side, but as time went on, calls from the Loyalist and Unionist side began growing in response to the suspicious circumstances surrounding several killings of members of their community. In that context, it isn't a stretch to imagine that the security services could have turned a blind eye to the planned murder of Neave. Many people from Northern Ireland, myself included, believe that no good can come from endlessly raking over the past, where injustices were done on all sides. While this is best in the long run, it sticks in the craw that we will never know exactly what suffering British intelligence could have prevented being visited on all the people and communities of Northern Ireland. All of it, just so they could keep their intelligence chess game going.